You had two big names. One was Bob Dylan, the other was Elvis Presley. They lived in different worlds, musically speaking. When Elvis sang a song by Bob Dylan, it really bothered a lot of folk music fans. It made them mad. It wasn't just a simple cover version, it was a clash of cultures. It was a clash of what music meant to different people. Think about Bob Dylan first. He came out of the folk scene. That scene was all about authenticity. It was about raw feeling. It was about truth. People who love folk music, they valued the words, they valued the message, they wanted to hear real stories, they wanted to hear songs that meant something deep. Folk music wasn't about shiny production, it wasn't about perfect voices, it was about an honest voice. It was about a voice that might even crack a little. It was about a voice that sounded like a real person. It sounded like someone just like you, or someone you knew. Dylan was perfect for that. His voice was not pretty in the traditional sense. It was nasal, it was sometimes rough. But it was his voice. It was unique. It carried weight. It carried emotion. When Dylan sang, you felt it. You felt the words, you felt the struggle, you felt the hope. The folk music world was also very much about protest. It was about standing up for what was right. It was about questioning things. It was against the establishment. It was against the mainstream. It liked things that were homemade. It liked things that were simple. It liked acoustic guitars. It liked banjos. It liked harmonicas. It didn't like big orchestras. It didn't like backup singers. It didn't like flashing lights. It was a serious kind of music for serious times. For these fans, the songwriter was king. The person who wrote the words, who crafted the message, they were the artist. The singer was just the messenger. But Dylan was both. He was the great songwriter. He was also the great messenger. He was seen as a prophet by some. He spoke for a generation. He spoke for people who felt like outsiders. And then you have Elvis. He was the king. He was rock and roll. He was pure spectacle. He was charisma. He was electric guitars. He was drums. He was a phenomenon. His world was commercial. It was bright lights. It was big stages. It was screaming fans. Elvis started out raw. He started out rebellious. He shocked people, but over time, he became a huge star. He became part of the establishment in a way. He made movies, he had hit records, he sold millions, he was famous all over the world. His voice was smooth, it was powerful, it was beautiful, he could sing anything. He could make any song his own. But for folk fans, this was part of the problem. His music was often seen as entertainment first. It was seen as product. It wasn't always seen as art in the same way folk music was. So, when Elvis decided to sing a Dylan song, it was a big deal. It felt like two planets colliding. Folk fans loved their music. They felt a strong connection to it. It was precious to them. It was real, it was theirs, and Elvis was everything they often stood against. He was the mainstream. He was the commercial machine. He was the polished product. The biggest reason for the anger was about authenticity. Folk music fans believed in the authentic voice. They believed in the real performance. Dylan's music was seen as coming from a deep, personal place. It was raw. It was unpolished. It had grit. It had a certain kind of truth that couldn't be faked. And Elvis, for all his talent, was seen by some as an entertainer. He put on a show. His music, especially later in his career, was often very produced. It was smoothed out. It had strings, it had backup singers, it had a big lush sound. This sound was very different from the sparse acoustic sound of folk music. To folk purists, Elvis taking a Dylan song felt like he was taking something pure and making it commercial. He was taking something deeply felt and making it into entertainment. They felt he was stripping away the song's soul. They felt he was taking away its original meaning. They felt he was sanding down its rough edges. And those rough edges were important. Those rough edges were what made it real. They were what made it powerful. Think about the voice itself. Dylan's voice carried the words in a very specific way. It was almost conversational. It was like he was talking directly to you. It was like he was sharing a secret or a deep thought. His voice had a certain world weariness to it. It had a certain wisdom. Elvis's voice was glorious. It was powerful, it was beautiful, it could convey emotion, but it was a different kind of emotion. It was a more universal emotion. It was a more romantic emotion. It wasn't the same kind of earthy, almost painful honesty that Dylan's voice had. When Elvis sang a song, he made it sound perfect. He made it sound polished. He made it sound like a classic ballad. But for folk fans, the song was never meant to be a polished ballad. It was meant to be a simple statement. It was meant to be heard with just a guitar, or maybe a harmonica. The beauty of the song for them was in its simplicity. It was in its starkness. It was in its raw vulnerability. The arrangement was another huge point of contention. Elvis's version used more instruments. It had a bigger sound. It was orchestral. It was dramatic. This kind of arrangement was seen as betraying the song's folk roots. It was seen as taking a quiet, intimate song and making it grand. It was like taking a whispered secret and shouting it from the rooftops. It changed the feeling, it changed the mood, it changed everything. Folk music was meant to be heard in coffee houses. It was meant to be heard around a campfire. It wasn't meant to be heard in a huge concert hall with a full orchestra. There was also a sense of protectedness. Folk fans felt like Dylan was their artist. His songs were their songs. They spoke to their values, they spoke to their generation. Elvis was not part of that world. He represented a different kind of power. He represented a different kind of success. He was the ultimate mainstream star. For him to cover a Dylan song felt like an intrusion. It felt like he was co-opting something sacred. It felt like he was trying to make money off of something pure. The idea of selling out was very big in the folk world. If a folk artist became too popular, too commercial, they were often accused of selling out. They were seen as abandoning their principles. They were seen as chasing fame and money. So when Elvis, the king of commercial success, sang a Dylan song, it felt like the song itself was being sold out. It felt like its message was being diluted for the masses. It felt like its artistic integrity was being compromised. And let's talk about the specific song. It's a song of yearning. It's a song about the passage of time. It's a song about a long, hard journey. It's a song about missing someone deep. It's a song about a kind of lonesome hope. Dylan sings it with a quiet strength. He sings it with a certain resignation. He sings it with a deep, reflective feeling. The lyrics are beautiful. They are poetic. They are full of imagery. The words talk about the road ahead, about a weary soul, about the comfort of a loved one's present. It is a very personal, very introspective song. It feels like a prayer almost. When Elvis sang it, he put his powerful voice on it. He sang it beautifully. He poured emotion into it, but it was a different kind of emotion. It was a more dramatic, more operatic emotion. It sounded like a grand declaration of love or longing. It didn't sound like the quiet, humble prayer that Dylan sang. The song's original power came from its understated delivery. It came from the way Dylan just laid out his feelings raw and exposed with minimal fuss. Elvis's version, for all its vocal prowess, changed that. It took that quiet honesty and made it into something bigger, something more theatrical. And for many folk fans, that was the problem. It felt like the core of the song, its quiet, aching heart, had been replaced by a more grandiose show of feeling. It wasn't that Elvis couldn't sing it. He could. He sang it with incredible skill. He brought his own magic to it. He truly loved music, all kinds of music. He appreciated the song for its beauty. He didn't set out to offend anyone. He just wanted to sing a great song. He was known for taking songs from different genres and making them his own. He did it with blues songs, he did it with country songs, he did it with gospel songs. He saw a beautiful melody and meaningful lyrics, and he sang them. That was his gift. That was what he did. But the folk music scene had a different set of rules. It had a different way of looking at music. It was less about the performance and more about the message. It was less about the voice and more about the words. It was less about entertainment and more about truth. And for them, Dylan's original version was the truth. It was the pure form. Anything else was a deviation. Anything else was a watering down. The cultural context of the time also played a big part. The 1960s were a time of huge change. There were youth movements, there were protest movements, there were divides between different kinds of music and different kinds of people. Folk music was often seen as the music of the counterculture, of the intellectuals, of the activists. The rock and roll, especially the kind Elvis was making by them, was seen as mainstream entertainment. It was seen as part of the establishment. The lines were drawn. And when Elvis crossed that line, even if with good intentions, it was seen as an invasion. So, when folk fans heard Elvis's version, many felt a real sense of loss. They felt their song had been taken. They felt it had been changed. They felt it had been tamed. They felt its power had been diminished. They heard a beautiful voice, yes, but they also heard a kind of production that felt alien to the song's original spirit. They heard a grandeur that replaced the simple, raw honesty they cherished. It wasn't a universal anger, of course. Some people probably just enjoyed the sound of Elvis's voice. Some might have even liked the new arrangement, but for the core folk music fans, the purists, it was a hard pill to swallow. It represented everything they were trying to push against. It represented the commercialization of art. It represented the smoothing out of rough edges. It represented the triumph of entertainment over pure expression. Looking back, we can appreciate Elvis's vocal talent. We can hear the quality of his performance. But it's important to understand the context. It's important to understand what that song meant to a generation of folk music fans. It was more than just a song. It was a statement. It was a philosophy. And for many, Elvis's beautiful, polished version felt like a betrayal of that philosophy. It was like he had taken their quiet, personal anthem and turned it into something else entirely. Something big, something loud, something for them less authentic. The song was a deeply personal one for Dylan. It came from a place of introspection and longing. It spoke to a feeling of being on a long, solitary journey. Dylan's performance of it was spare, almost stark. It had a raw, emotional vulnerability that resonated deeply with his audience. They heard their own feelings reflected in his unadorned delivery. They heard the sound of someone grappling with life's big questions without any pretense or artifice. Elvis's rendition, by contrast, clothed the song in a different kind of beauty. He gave it a sweeping, almost cinematic quality. His powerful voice, backed by a full arrangement, turned it into a grand, romantic declaration. The subtle nuances of Dylan's original, the quiet hesitations, the almost conversational tone, were replaced by a more overt, more dramatic expression of emotion. This change in presentation fundamentally altered the song's impact for those who had fallen in love with Dylan's version. It was like taking a delicate, hand-drawn sketch and turning it into a vibrant, oil-painted landscape. Both can be beautiful, but they offer very different experiences. Folk music fans often saw their music as an alternative to the glitz and glamour of mainstream pop. They valued substance over style, meaning over spectacle. Elvis, for all his talent and charisma, was the epitome of style and spectacle. His very presence on a song could transform it from a humble offering into a grand production. This transformation was often seen as a loss, rather than a gain by those who cherished the song's original simplicity. They felt that the emotional truth of the song lay precisely in its unpolished, unadorned form. When Elvis added layers of instrumentation and vocal embellishment, it was perceived not as an enhancement, but as a distraction. It moved the song away from its core message and towards something more broadly appealing, and therefore, in their eyes, less profound. And this wasn't just about a single song, it was about a broader cultural divide. And it was about what music meant to different groups of people in a rapidly changing world. Folk music at its heart was often about connection to tradition, to community, to a shared sense of purpose, storytelling and passing on wisdom. Rock and roll, especially in its more commercial forms, was often about individual expression, about rebellion, about youth culture, and about pure enjoyment. These two perspectives were not always compatible, and in many cases, they were actively at odds. So, when Elvis, the icon of commercial rock and roll, covered a song by Dylan, the voice of the folk movement, it touched a raw nerve. It felt like a fundamental misunderstanding of what the song was and what it stood for. It was seen as an attempt to assimilate a powerful, countercultural statement into the very mainstream that folk music often critiqued. It was an act that, for many, symbolized the co-option of pure art by commercial interests. Elvis, in his own way, was a rebel in his early days. He challenged norms, he shocked society. But by the time he covered this song, he had become an institution. He was a symbol of success and mainstream appeal. Dylan, on the other hand, was still very much seen as an outsider, a voice challenging the status quo. The clash wasn't just musical, it was deeply symbolic. It represented the tension between two different visions for music, art, and culture itself. The cover did introduce the song to a wider audience. Many people who had never heard of Bob Dylan probably heard the song for the first time through Elvis. And for them, it might have been a beautiful song, a powerful song. But for those who knew and loved Dylan's original, it was a different story. It was a story of a beloved piece of art being reinterpreted in a way that, while technically brilliant, felt emotionally disingenuous to its core spirit. The anger wasn't necessarily directed at Elvis as a person, it was directed at what his version represented. It represented a perceived loss of innocence. It represented the commercial world encroaching on the artistic world. It represented the smooth, polished sound overwhelming the raw, authentic voice. And that's why Elvis's version of Tomorrow is a long time really got under the skin of folk music fans.